powerful gods are all around us. From the heavens, Zeus vanquishes threats to his dominion. Once, the god monster Typhon smothered the earth.
If anybody ever asks you what game in the Impression series of city builders should I start with, I would always say Zeus, because Zeus is the simplest one of all to understand and to play. It has the least amount of quirks that may become a bit fuzzy after a certain amount of years. For example, you don't properly remember that, yes, you can build roads under an aqueduct, it's just that an aqueduct by itself is a solid building and will block access to anything unless you build a road under it. I've seen the comments, I know I was wrong, I apologize. I would have corrected it in the video, but YouTube took away annotations. But see, that's why we have comments, so people can tell me when I'm wrong. Zeus was released in the grand year of 2000, 18 years ago, and it continued the idea of a game where you are the ruler of a city, and also it amplified the lie of the title. You would think, hey, I'm Zeus in this thing. No. Even though in the previous games you would become Caesar, Emperor of Rome, you would become Pharaoh in later campaigns, and I'm not entirely sure if you would actually become Cleopatra though. And I do think in the last one we're gonna cover, you do get to become the Emperor of China. In this one you were never actually a god, you were not Master of Olympus, but you did get to rub shoulders with Zeus, with Athena, with Apollo, with Dionysus, with all the cool cats of Mount Olympus. Now, thematically, I will always say, well, again, I have not finished playing Emperor properly, I would always say that Pharaoh was the one that did it best. You had the pyramids, you had the flooding plains, you had the feel that you were in Egypt. But Zeus itself was no slouch. I would say it came very close to Pharaoh, but it was a lot less rooted in reality than the previous games were. Yeah, and there were gods in all the previous games, but, and there's a big but, you could always assume that when something bad happened, or for example everything in your storehouse was bamboozled from beneath your face, that it wasn't maybe Hermes that did it, maybe just some crooks, some thieves that got away with it and were never caught. Maybe it was the priests themselves because they didn't have enough temples or money. But there's no sort of ambiguity in Zeus. The gods are there. If you worship them, if you build a temple to them, a grand, superb, marvelous temple, they will descend upon the earth and walk among your people. They return from semi-random events that give you positive or negative effects depending on how much you worship them, into walkers, into entities on the same level as your citizens, though about 5 times the size. And they would walk around, and depending on where you put temples and where you put the buildings, they would bless your buildings. You would have blessings that would prevent people from leaving even though you didn't have the right stuff. Ran out of food? Well, no problem. Aphrodite just keeps everybody around. She's got ways. Oh, there's a foreign army attacking you? Yeah, a giant made out of bronze just killed them all. You're welcome. But there was also less of an issue with you properly deciding which god to intentionally piss off. Pretty much every campaign had its own sort of gods that were always kind of going to be dicks to you, usually Poseidon, and for that reason you needed protection. You would need to make a temple to a god, and that god would try and fight that other god. If it was Zeus, he would just thunderbolt everybody to oblivion, cause he's Zeus, nobody's gonna mess with him, unless we're talking monsters. The game was very much entrenched in Greek mythology, so you would get throughout your adventures all sorts of incidents where you were attacked by monsters. And gods, they don't care. For the most part, I don't think they cared. You would have to rely on heroes. You'd have to build a hall that would live up to their expectations, to certain specifications. You would have to summon them, and then they would go out and kill the monster. They would always kill the monster. I don't think it was up to discussion if they could kill it or not. That was the legend. That's how it played out. That's what they did. And then after they did their business, they would not go away. You did not have to constantly please them by by giving them stuff. The gods, neither. They would always kind of be your friends after you built them a temple, and they'll always be there. You could pray to them for more bonuses, but they would always be there. And you could use the heroes and even the favor of the gods. Like Ares gave you a couple of armies, you could use them in your conquest of the world. You could reach out to different cities throughout Greece to conquer them, to rob them, in a sort of world-spanning system that was still not really all that developed. From what I've played of Emperor, I think that one has a much more elaborate system. At least that's what I got the impression of up until now. Get it? Impression Games, it's the studio's name. And the heroes would always be there to defend your city in case someone else showed up and tried to conquer you. Unless, you bribe them, which you could always do in these games, if you had the money. Now, the reason why I would recommend this game as a starting point for anyone who's delved into the Impression Games library is library of city builders, because they made other games as well, is that it's, I would say, the easiest one to play for two reasons. Okay, let's make it three reasons. Number one, you only have one water source. There's a fountain. You can build it pretty much anywhere. I do not remember properly if irrigation is ever a problem in the game. I mean, it's presumed that you're in Greece. There's fertile ground pretty much everywhere. There's water everywhere. There is no reason to be afraid that you will run out of water. I do think there were maybe some areas that you did need to dig trenches in, but for the most part, they were not really that common. Sure, you didn't have the aqueducts that were very beautiful in Caesar, but at least you didn't have the hassle of building them and the reservoirs. Number two, food collection was a lot easier on account of grasslands, fertile lands would never submerge themselves. They would always be above water, they would always be easily accessible. Of course, that was a characteristic of Pharaoh that was intrinsically tied to the Nile, but it did also pose an extra challenge for players who were just starting out. But most importantly, number three is that there were no more interviewers, as I could call them. People that would go out of a building that you recently built to look for workers. That bit was out. You would always have constant access to the entire work pool, no matter where you place the building. You could place it on the other end of the map, so far away that if you built a market there, it would just not be able to gather any sort of food or goods from your stores because you would be told they are too far away. That you could build a storage area there and just order it to get stuff and it will be sent there eventually. Not having to do that, not having to place buildings with people in them in places that you needed to construct certain industrial areas, freed up the game so much that it just let you go nuts with the design of it. I know that some people would say that this sort of ruined the challenge a bit, it made it a bit too easy maybe, and to be honest, the way that the game sort of fudges the amount of workers you need to always be sort of exactly right, depending on the tax level you set. I mean, all too often when I have an excess of unemployed people, when I lower the wages by just one level, well, they magically all go to zero. It's almost like the game tends toward that number, or at least it does on the normal level of difficulty. On higher ones, I do believe you have fewer workers as well, apart from less money. But no matter on what difficulty level you do decide to play it on, it is easier, at least in my opinion, compared to Caesar and compared to Pharaoh. Again, haven't played enough of Emperor to be a good judge of it yet. Wait a week. And going back a bit to the idea of mythology, the game's campaigns were centered very much around that. We'd participate in all sorts of events like the labors of Hercules, the Odyssey, or the Iliad. I get them confused quite often. In the expansion, you would have Atlantis with its own quirks, with its own types of buildings, in some cases its own resources. You would have the ability to found the city of Troy. It took you pretty much all over the place in terms of the mythology of Greece, so that kind of makes it the worst one in terms of historical accuracy, in terms of you actually learning something about actual Greece. I wouldn't even say that it was authentic in terms of mythology, because let's face it, Greek mythology is kind of rapey. I mean, Zeus got around. This was the more kid-friendly version of mythology. And hey, that's fine. No problems with that. But considering when it came out, right after the Hercules TV series ended and when Xeno was still going on, I think it was in its last year, it fit quite well. Mechanically, it is still pretty much the same game it's been since Caesar 2. You've got your walkers, you've got your buildings, you've got food you have to manage, you've got production lines, you have resource gathering, you have trade, some diplomacy here and there, but you don't have your own pay anymore. You don't pay yourself money, you don't get to decide the exact wages of everybody else. It is a bit simplified in certain aspects compared to the previous ones. You don't have a score anymore for your culture, you don't have a score anymore for your prosperity. It is simplified. And some fans of the series may not enjoy it as much because of it. And I get it, it does feel like it took away something. But I think it did compensate quite a lot with the impact that mythology, that the gods have now on the game. That they're present among you, that there are monsters roaming around, that deities can come with you in battle, at least up to a point. It's honestly because of the simplicity of it, because you don't have to make a shack next to the buildings you want to have workers in them, that I probably played this one the most of the entire franchise of other games that Impression made in the genre. There are of course things that could have been done better. The combat is still at best. There is still no zoom function. And the temples to the gods, although they can look quite nice, it just sort of don't have the same oomph to them that the pyramids did. I mean, the pyramids, they take a heck of a while to build, and you see them being constructed layer by layer by layer. Here they're sort of there, and they put tiles on them and some statues, and that's it. They don't have as much of an impact, which is why the expansion brought in pyramids again, this time made from orichalcum. You could also harvest sea urchins, though I do think there's a bug in the game relating to sea urchins or the animation for gathering them and the fact that modern processors are a bit too fast. I know a friend of mine had the issue where he couldn't actually progress in the campaign from a point because he couldn't get her food from urchins. I haven't played that bit of the campaign on a modern system, so I can't really say for sure. But even without the campaigns, you can always have fun with the sandbox mode, and you can even make your own maps with the editor that's included. Maps to which you can add all sorts of threats and adventures, you can make custom campaigns even. There's a bountiful amount of content for the game, and you can find it right now on GOG for the low price. Well, it used to be lower, I got them all on sale a couple of weeks ago for the low price. I mean, just Zeus is available for the low price of only, well, 8.5 euros. You could probably wait for the sale, so it'll be a bit lower. Also, you are going to have to add the patch that sort of makes it properly viewable on a high resolution screen, but you will find that on ModDB. And unlike the previous games, I think the high resolution patches are absolutely necessary here. Zeus has gigantic maps compared to the previous ones, and I mean huge in some cases. Maps that were you to play them on the old resolutions would take you days to, well, not days, I'm being hyperbolical, but it would take a lot of scrolling. So next week is Emperor Rise of the Middle Kingdom. Let's hope I don't mess up anything in that one like I did with Caesar. Goodbye.